So today we have Owen, who is literally my brother. How you doing?
Literally. Great.
Great. And this chat has been a long time on the cards. I think we floated the idea back in November or even October. Haven't talked about epoch philosophies, Eros and Civilization video. Got us talking about a bunch of stuff. Drew and I think it's fair to say a long running on and off conversation for the last 10 years.
Probably 10 years. The dissonance has become closer to harmony.
Yeah, certainly.
Year, probably.
So, and that's the thing over this last year. The conversation's taken like quite a turn, and that video, Eros and Civilization, I think it chucked a stone back to earlier parts of the conversation, but recontextualized them in our sort of a new, like you put it, a closer harmony between our two stances, which in a crude way I would describe as, and this is a crude way, and I was even playing with the idea of clickbaiting the title with something like fucking materialist owns spiritualist or something like that, but materialism and spiritualism. And I think
material spiritualism.
I was going to say materialism, but that's already the word.
Yeah.
I think what I want to get from the chat on is like your road. Yeah, and again, this is crude use of the terms, so just roll with them for the moment, because I think through the chat the nuance will come out. But your road from a spiritualist position, being faced with materialism and the sort of I'm guessing contradictions in materialism that only someone coming from your perspective would see, and that perhaps a lot of sort of materialists or wannabe materialists, and that's not derogatory, that's just because we're all just trying, would be blindsided from, if you know what I mean. And yeah, to try to let's eke out a sort of a bridge, a common space, something that doesn't posit spiritualism versus materialism, but posits something else on the, like on an axis, something. Yeah. If spiritualism and materialism was on the x-axis, something on a y-axis, something where down on one side of that pole is shit that we don't agree with, and on the other side of the pole is awesome stuff that we would both probably want to work towards for the world.
When you're saying materialism, are you in the philosophical sense or like the Marxian sense?
Oh yeah, Marxian.
Worth explaining that for anyone.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not aware of a philosophical materialism. So if there's something distinct there, do bring it up. But like the two that I would think that like.
Yeah, I just mean the common
one. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's what I was going to say there. Like the common materialism, like, oh, you're being a materialist. Is someone too into things, buying things, consumerism stuff. But no, of course not that. Materialism in the sense that that history is the product of sort of material forces and agencies bashing against each other and resulting in outcomes. And it's not opposed in any way to spiritualism, but it is opposed to and works from Hegel's idealism. So, and I won't go into that, but I was gonna say that, and that's another, the way materialism, we just mentioned how materialism is used in normal day, being an idealist is often used in a really sort of bastardized way normally as well. But it's not that sort of idealism either.
Well, I'd sort of group like materialism and idealism, phenomenal and noumenal, and subjective and objective. They're not all the same dialectics, but they're all similar in my head, if you know what I mean. Would you get that at all now?
I haven't thought about it. Certainly an interesting frame. I'm not even comfortable with noumenal. Give me that again.
Well, phenomenal being that which we experience, and noumenal being that which happens regardless of our experience or regardless of our perception.
I had that down. I actually scrubbed it off. Scrubbed it off the notes. The noumenal point that you made, that you brought up, that Doug Lane said in one of the acid left videos. I saw it and I was like, what the fuck does that mean again?
Yeah.
But if that comes up, I mean, this is going to be a freewheeling chat. If that comes up, definitely we can go into it. I do remember like getting it when he said it. I just don't remember what he said.
Oh, I know. Yeah, it's really hard to relay in your mind. I had to watch it 3 times or something. I thought about putting it in slow motion.
So hang on, do you mean those 3 sets of things, like that there's 2, each side is sort of similar to the one below it, as opposed to in terms of the relationship that one would have with the other, it's similar across the 3 sets?
Yeah, not the same, but similar. I don't know, they like
a similar sort of relationship.
Yeah.
Like not opposite.
Yeah.
Certainly. Yeah. No, that makes loads of sense. So yeah, what Hegel's idealism, I'm not mad familiar with it, but it posited that sort of it's the ideas that people have, that's where sort of history unfolds from. The bashing of ideas, a crude way people have put it is the sort of thesis idea, antithesis, the opposite idea coming together and forming a synthesis. I don't think that's actually attributed to either Hegel or Marx, but it's a sort of, it's very stylized way of putting the idea of dialectics, things coming together, bashing through, and forming another. And the big thing for materialism is that it looked at history in terms of periods defined by humans and their relationship to material things. So the means of production, the things that sustain our living. And where in feudalism you had lords and peasants, under capitalism you had capitalists and workers. And without going into that, because I don't think we're at that stage and it might not even come up, but that's the sort of it's what material historical changes happened to develop that shift, is the materialist outlook. And going forward, we hope to sort of change the relationships of to production, to change social relations between ourselves, the material underpinnings of society, and have a new society, better society than capitalism. So I think for Hegel, the idea was that, and the young Hegelians, which Marx was, the idea was that it was all, everything played out in the head, like in the human mind. And Marx's sort of departure from his old group was that he was looking at, I guess, he was looking at the poverty despite the ideas that existed, and was just like, well, listen, you can think all day about good things for people, but they're not going to happen because this underpinning relationship exists, and that has to change. I mean, like, so I suppose now Marx didn't have the luxury of foresight, which is now our hindsight of the 20th century, where capitalism sort of overcame its many of its own contradictions, pushing what Marx foresaw down the line, the next historical juncture, change, shift. And I think I would argue that capitalism managed to sort of smooth over those contradictions with ideas and culture and sort of non-material things and ideology, and managed to sort of keep things ticking over, reorient itself when it lost power early last century and regained it later last century. And all this was sort of, by rights, what happened after World War II should have maybe led to like the communist revolution continuing globally. But capitalism managed to sort of gain the upper hand, and I don't know if they had the material capacity and power to do it back then, because they had invested so much in the war. They lost a lot of that power, I think. And yeah, so we see the power of ideology and culture in maintaining the status quo and tempering the sort of the workers who before the wars were really like coming together, but after the wars, if they had kept coming together because they were in power, a position of power, because capital had lost so much invested in the war, blah blah blah, they would have been in the position really to sort of hammer home. But yeah, I think an idealist spin on capitalism, which also known as Keynesianism and Fordism and social democracy, I think that kept capitalism going. And we have the power of ideas, and a load of sort of left-wing thinkers then throughout the last century starting to look at ideas again, and materialism and the whole working class thing fading away and Marx fading away. And it's only now that materialism is taking a rise again.
And the American propaganda machine really like ran a hardcore number on everyone, right? Like people still like dirty socialist or filthy socialist.
Oh hell yeah!
Like they're usually the words that come before socialists. And like
I was listening to a podcast last night. This is Revolution. It's on Zero Books. Oh God, I only started listening to it, so I can't remember the two dudes' names. One's Pascal, the other Robert Pascal. I can't remember. Anyway, they were talking about back in the 30s, there being in LA, people were terrified. Not that there was this like landing, a land development thing, like a ghetto, and they were going to put in loads of social housing, and the LA Times were dead against it because they were in the pocket of the developers who wanted private ownership, and they were just like, the architect's a communist. And so because it's the 30s, and Red Scare and all that, they took the court or whatever, they took the architect, for fuck's sake, the architect to a hearing and said, "Are you a communist?" And he goes, I don't think that's a constitutional question. Like, what's that got to do with anything? And they said, well, he didn't say he wasn't, and that was it. This enormous, amazing revamp.
Pre-McCarthy or post-McCarthy?
I don't know when McCarthy starts, but that's certainly if it's not then, it's leading up to then.
Yeah.
But yeah, certainly
there has been a mega brainwash on it, like super, I suppose similar to Catholic resonance today, things that you see in Ireland, where you're like, oh my God, we literally only think that batshit thing because it got Catholicism and all the years leading up to now.
And I think to bring it back to what you're saying or asked, I think it shows the power of the sort of undisputable power of ideas and idealism in sort of conditioning history. But
right, yeah.
but I do think there is a line in terms of what's necessary for real fundamental change, and whatever role idealism plays in that. Like if you imagine history as a series of cogs, bigger cogs move slower and all. In my mind, the materialist cog is one of those big ones, whereas idealist ones are sort of pro
Series
or
of smaller ones.
yeah. But if I was, and especially what age am I? Especially about 20 years ago, if I was sort of thinking about like spiritualism and stuff, if I was to put a crude framework with spirit and put spiritualism in there somewhere, I would put that as an even larger cog, I guess. That I see the limits of focusing on that materialist change, if you know what I mean. I appreciate that, even though that's what that's the basis for our conversation ongoing this last decade. It's my focus. It's the thing that I would put above all else in terms of needing to change for a universal betterment of people and the planet. And it's something like after that, I'd be happy to sort of discuss spirituality in and for itself, if you know what I mean. And I think before you come in there, I think it was at Marx's, I don't have the words off, but like at Marx's funeral, Engels said something about like stuff like politics, culture, religion, all the sort of the things that sort of occupy people. There's, until everyone's fed and housed, these things are just unimportant, and that would be my stance. Do you know what I mean?
I do to an extent. Like I do absolutely agree. But then I suppose my main concern about spirituality is that it's absolutely rubbished from every angle at this point. Like new-ageisms and religions and everything have just left it completely undesirable. And like, to put it in the way you put it there kind of makes it sound like a luxury, whereas I feel like whether you're housed or not, it should be included in the way we perceive and understand ourselves and understand our reality. And by should, I just mean I think it would help a lot.
Help, yeah. I hear that.
But I suppose like it's usually people who hit rock bottom that it helps most, or that's most evidently helping. Like people who hit rock bottom with drug addiction and whatnot. You got people who replace their drug addiction with an addiction to God, basically. But I like that addiction to God seems to be more like the communal element of it, like what they're sharing with people, and they're buzzing off. I don't know, like buzzing off the grace they're sharing together. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it's one of the only times you see long-lasting positive effect of spiritual community. And whereas it usually ends up on everyone riding each other, drugs and some sort of corruption. Like,
that's interesting, because before you added that part, I was going to say it's like I fully appreciate. So as you were saying it, I was sort of thinking, religion today and even spiritualism, because of the framing of the last half century with new-ageism and stuff. It's like spiritualism in terms of how we speak about it is really crude, and there's definitely something to be said for it, but probably in words that we've just not spoken yet, although you might have, but we people, everyone, general society. And to me then, so what you're saying is missing. I think there's three parts to this. What you're saying, when someone's hit rock bottom and they replace an addiction with a new thing, it's like the first thing comes to my mind is that Engels quote at Marx's funeral. So, well, I mean, these people don't have something because of capitalism there. The second thing is, you mentioned, well, it's given them the communal element. And it's like, well, I think if people did have their material needs met, then the social relations between us, especially in a post-capitalist society, because capitalism conditions our social relationships in terms of what one can do for another, how one can profit from another. Without that framing, that lack doesn't exist. And before you respond, the third thing, the interesting thing is that the last thing you said, how it then gets corrupted. And I would say because we're still in that material situation in capitalism, so that brings someone to the rock bottom where they lack materially so much that they couldn't even possibly compensate for the lack of sociality in our society, that they then find something that is social at that bottom because they've given up so many other standards that we all think is great. And I think that's sort of like a bourgeois individualism, like the sense of independence that money can buy and all that. When you don't have that, then you're sort of almost free to start relating to people. But then because you're getting a second sort of a different type of empowerment that isn't cash based, you might lose the run of yourself because you're still in capitalism, and it ends up in sex, drugs, and a Netflix video.
Yeah, I know. I absolutely agree that, like,
I'm not saying that's higher than religion.
yeah.
Just that human experience of it.
I think our material needs should be met. I think even if our material needs are met, though, there's a lot of people who are super well off, growing up super well off, ending up seriously depressed, seriously empty, turning to drugs because they feel an emptiness. I think that they're indicative of the spiritual crisis we're in. You know what I mean? The bastardization of the concept of God. It's gone, like, and there's no way to grab onto it without seeming like a silly goose. But what you're saying there, that like we if we took care of those things first, and then, that sounds a little bit like the Jordan Peterson thing to me, where it's like, oh, you shouldn't be trying to change the world if you haven't changed your own room first. And the argument to that is like, why wouldn't I do both? Like, why wouldn't I be doing both at the same time? You know what I mean? And then I see people definitely seen things of Zizek talking about what do you call it? Fast food spiritual experiences or something like that, and meditation, and I suppose like Western Buddhism and whatnot is like a distraction from trying to create revolution or create better conditions for us all to live in. But that sounds to me like that, like you're kind of saying to someone, why would you bother eating healthy or going to the gym? Like, we're trying to change things out here. Like, I'm just nurturing my body. You know what I mean? I'm just nurturing my spirit. Why would you bother sitting around reading that book or painting or whatever? It's like, yeah, but I'm nurturing my mind. You know what I mean? Like, and I just think that those three elements should be paid attention to, not equally at all times, but acknowledged and nurtured.
Mind, body, spirit.
Yeah, in their own time, in their own right. Like,
I'm taking that in the two parts. If I could remember the Jordan Peterson point, or what occurred to me when you said it. It's like so you're responding to what I had said about, what did I say? You're responding to what I said about the lack.
Sorry, go on.
Yeah, so it's like so because I'm definitely seeing two sort of spiritualisms in action there, and it's like when we don't have anything, I can definitely see. Oh, no, not when we don't have anything. In terms of your final statement there, in treating mind, body, and spirit at the same time, why would we ignore self-improvement just because we disagree with Jordan Peterson or something? Spiritualism, or to my mind, spiritualism in that sense gives us perspective on anything and everything that's happening.
Yeah.
But to bring it back before we're able to look after the mind and body, Spiritualism, I would agree in that final sense, would definitely help through those situations. But what I think often people are getting is that McDonald's, that fast food version of spiritualism, and that there is some sort of corruption. So I wouldn't. Well, in terms of what Zizek would sort of criticize about, I wouldn't imagine he would just rubbish the concept totally. It's just that he's looking at the material situation, the conditions, the lack, the social lack. And like that was the first thing I was going to say, and I sort of dropped it. But with the Jordan Peterson thing, it that lack to me is very much socialization, which would relate in my mind to spiritualism through the spirit we get and the energy we get from knowing people and loving people and being in communion with people. And it's our material conditions is attacking that. So anything that we're anything that any like because it's attacked, and because we don't relate to people so well, and we're so dysfunctional, that we're getting a lot of what we're missing through mediated platforms, internet, phones, and it's through that where I think we're getting that fast food spiritualism.
Yeah, right. Yeah. But I could say as well, like what I agree with Zizek when he's talking about that is like what you're saying, that fast food, the like commodified spirituality, like trend, vogue spirituality, let's say. Don't mean to judge anyone when I'm saying that. But yeah, that does seem to be like middle to upper class sort of distraction, if you want to put it that way. Like, have you seen that Goop thing, Gwyneth Paltrow?
I've heard of it.
Well, I referred to what Zizek's talking about as Goop spirituality because you know what I mean, because it's perfect. Like, and they go and they do legitimate things. They go and meet Wim Hof and they do stuff with him. They go and take magic mushrooms and so on, have enlightening experiences, whatever. But it just the whole thing is
it's another experience. Like,
but then there's another way of looking at what he's saying, like outside of the fast food culture part of it, in that if everyone decided they wanted to be a Buddhist monk and went off to Tibet or whatever, like nothing much is changing for all the people who don't have that that opportunity, right? So that like I can see the negative aspect of it, of what he's saying there as well, you know what I mean? But even not to go off to Tibet, if I just decide, let's say, spirituality made me feel so whole, I'm just going to dedicate my life to that, and I just sat there meditating and looking deeply into flowers and stuff for the day, you know, while the world burns around me. Yeah. It's like I have a right to do that. Like that is a person's choice, but it's not going to get anyone very far.
Yeah.
You know, at large, you're sort of opting out. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think that was definitely, you know, those early criticisms I would have had back 10 years ago or whatever. I definitely think, well, I guess what I mean, I assume you do, but like, do you feel like even if it was only for a brief moment, that might have been something that appealed, or that sort of framing of spiritualism was something that you wanted to buy into, if it was like
yeah it was. But I had definitely, you know the way our culture was as we were growing up, like we were always fringe culture, and we were very proud to not be part of society, you know what I mean? We were very proud to be excluded and to exclude ourselves. So like, I suppose just the pandemic even has changed that, and I've talked to other people who that's changed for them so much as well, where like, you know, you realize your responsibility to your brothers and sisters around you, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
you realize that you're all part of this. Like, in, you know, I want to pay taxes now.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Tax evasion would have sounded like the goal before.
That's what occurs to me when you're saying that. The idea that I'm glad you said it. Like, the idea that it is someone's right to sort of opt out that way, and you know, sort of to an extent it is, but it is a very specific analysis of the human subject that would agree with that. And I think that I don't think Marx or materialism is anti-individualism, but what does change from the sort of the liberal bourgeois individualism is that obligation, that material obligation, that if solidarity, basically, like if and probably the basis for all the sort of the SJW snowflake discourse on privilege and checking all that sort of thing, like that if someone is in a situation where they are able to sort of opt out despite, if they were on the highest sort of peak of a country that wasn't going to be affected by the rising tide of climate change and all that, and the forest fires, etc., and they were able to sort of to be zen and to somehow to have their body looked after rather than looking after their body. So they're achieving the or whatever combination of looking after themselves they want. That that does sort of denote a privilege that even just, and like that word just needs to be sort of broke through big so much, so hard. But like what it translates as is the sort of the failure to recognize not that people are unequal, but that they're not free because one can, just because of our material relationships. If someone's winning, someone else is losing, and I think that's the fundamental, a fundamental formula for our current situation. So if you're in a place where you can do that, focus like that, you're winning, and that means someone else is losing. And I mean that cheapens spirituality, surely. Anyway, like.
Well, yeah, I agree with that. But when I said, or when I say, I think someone has the right to opt out like that, it's because there's people who have no other option because of the pain they're in. And the example that comes to mind is, do you know Louis Theroux, when he goes to India and he's going around with all the gurus and people who've joined cults over there and stuff.
Right.
But he talks to this one guy. I think his real name was Courtney, maybe. He has some other new like Hindi type name, but he's talking to him, and this guy is like, yeah, he's really like just like forcing this zone, and Louis trying to break through it. He's trying to be like, yeah, but who are you? Like, I know you come to this place for whatever reason, and your man's just like, you can see him just like, don't make me let go of this. Like, if I don't hold on to this,
Wow.
that's it. I'm a fucking goner. Like, I'm gonna kill myself, basically. You know what I mean? So that's kind of what was coming to mind when I'm saying, like, I wouldn't hold it against someone if they want to go off into the mountains.
Yeah.
Just no good if everyone does that. Like,
right. Yeah.
And it may not always be a place of privilege. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No. Sorry. Of course. Yeah. When you framed it that way, like. I can see that there are situations where people, whatever, even if it's fast food, even if it's cheap, even if it misses all sorts of other things, it is literally keeping someone alive, and
people
saying
people are yearning regardless. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And like when I say we should, I don't mean to say we should. You know what I mean? Like I think it would be good if it was thought of just the same as learning something to nurture your mind, or eating something, or exercising to nurture your body. Like it should just be on the same level as that. You know what I mean? It should, like as much of a privilege as eating a sandwich is having the time to spend 15 minutes in silence.
Oh yeah. I definitely didn't mean to come across as like if you have the time to meditate whatsoever, there's some sort of privilege going on there. Oh, what was I going to say to that? Gone. I think it had something to do with like, so that's certainly sort of how the conversation has been framed in the past, and definitely how it feels that it's sort of developed for both of us. I think there's like the idea for Marx in terms of his individualism and in terms of his relation to work and like there's almost I wish I kept some quotes. I think I might have even sent you some before, but well past them. But there is almost a sort of like a latent sense of spirituality there, and I think that's what's important in sort of recognizing that, yeah, despite whatever fast food and however the historic um, religion, organized religion, the new age stuff that came out of the 60s, and whatever sort of techno mediated religion that people are consuming now, and including things like mindfulness and all the derivatives. There's just, and I think that's what you're sort of alluding to with what you just said about like putting it on par with a sandwich and reading a book. Like there just does seem to be a need to rearticulate it away from those three historic instantiations of spiritualism. And yeah, one sort of interesting thing is like in Marx and in his critique of capitalism and his materialist perspective on society, and it's been touched on numerous times since we started chatting, is that currently the sort of compulsion to compete, and to not to earn a profit out of greed, but the fact that you're compelled to profit in some way through the sale of the goods you made by exploiting people, or just by the fact that you had nothing else to sell but your own labor and get exploited. We're in a situation where we're totally bereft, I feel, from being able to articulate or rearticulate spiritualism, and the stepping stone between point A and point C there is the way we get to relate to each other. And that's what I was saying, like it's been touched on. The lack of the lack of socialization, I think, is the way to put it. Does that make sense to you at all? That like there's so much of this would be unlocked almost inherently, almost naturally, if we were to be able to sort of relate to each other in terms of like, oh wow, you've made this fucking loaf of bread, and I've got these bushels of wheat that you can make more, but I've also got all these eggs, and this whole the communist ideal or whatever.
So I think what you're saying is that if we were living a reality of that kind with one another, that there would be a spiritual essence present that would be palpable, whether we're acknowledging it or not, that would be satisfying that hole that we feel
through the work through the free labor, the free work for ourselves, which could only exist if it was also for other people. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It does. I suppose another part of our discussion, or what we might have disagreed on over the however long it's been, is I just wonder how these sort of things could work. Like to use idealism or idealistic in the traditional sense, like it seems
the common sense, you mean?
Yeah. It's just super idealistic. Like I don't know how you get people to that place. There, I don't know if there's never been a version of it. Where it's harmonious, where it doesn't get corrupted, where people aren't greedy. And I know, like, you can kind of put these things back to conditions, like, it's the starving person who's robbing the thing, the bread. You know what I mean? It's because that person is starving, because they weren't shared with, because they weren't taken care of. But is it just that? I don't know. Is it just that? I mean, there's a lot of people who are super well off who are doing really horrible things. You know what I mean? They're not starving of anything, like, and they're probably more inclined, to.
What's the what I missed there was the sort of the stealing the bread and the well off doing bad things. What's the significance of doing bad things there? Like anti-spiritualistic or against other people?
No, not at all. Just like a Marxian utopia, or a communist utopia, like if it was reached, like it seems like
Oh,
again, any ideology is that people are grabbing onto seems to be super idealistic. You know what I mean? It's like, well, take the anarcho-capitalism or whatever, you know, the non-aggression principle.
yeah.
Like I just think that's so ridiculous. Like,
So the doing an antisocial act in terms of it doesn't matter if you're materially well off, both like whether you're well off or whether you're not well off, antisocial shit happens one way or the other. So why would
yeah, kind of not why would you try or anything like that, just like when we aim towards something like Marx's version of utopia, right? Like a communist utopia where people's needs are met, you know, housing, education, food,
why would that stop antisocial shit?
and health. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I believe that people aren't still going to be fucking each other over. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, first, people fucking raging there, like, to state that Marx was like an anti-utopian in the earlier socialists.
Pardon my ignorance.
Yeah. But I mean, what we're saying is like, because he was never really prescriptive either, he wouldn't have given an ideal to work towards.
Can I just say, I haven't heard, Marx has never explained this to me from his deathbed. This is when I hear people talking about their version of a Marxian utopia.
Well, for those people who told you that, it's up to us to figure out what we want. And Marx's argument was like, we'll be able to do that once we sort of get rid of capitalism. But to take a point, because I mean, because people won't say it, but maybe they should say it more. They should start outlining that vision more. Be a little bit utopian in a sense. Start sort of like, while it will take the material sort of conditions to shift and those relationships with the means of production to shift and all that, that's probably not going to happen if there aren't if people aren't invested in it and sort of outlining those ideas. It's also kind of fun, like. But to answer the actual question, I think that currently what to my mind, and this brings us right back to the very start of this conversation, just on a deeper level, to my mind, those antisocial things happen. Like if you're not well off because out of desperation, but if you are well off, like, capitalism has just pitted us into all against all, and
dog eat dog.
Yeah, and I think regardless of how much you make, like you've just got to sort of take what you can get, and because it's just that the methods of doing that vary wildly, to outright theft to or from outright theft to incredible sophisticated legal systems and financial systems, and I think both fly in the face of human decency. People are outraged, less so, some less so at one and less so at the other, blah, blah, blah. Depends probably where you're from. But we still recognize that, like, basic decency, I think.
Can I put it this way?
Yeah.
Rather than theft, it's probably a really a silly one to use. But like for abuse, you know what I mean? Someone who has been abused, it's like abuse is usually carried out by someone who has been abused, and you know can take a lot to break that chain. Therapy or whatever, community, so on. But that's one example that's a little bit more serious and probably a bit more usable in this context. But then another would be like someone could fall and hit their head and become an extremely abusive person. You know, like
Yeah.
Now got a hormone or chemical imbalance in their brain that is changing their actions.
Yeah.
You know, and there's every variety of this. Like, I'm not trying to shit on any sort of reaching for the stars. You know what I mean? Because there's going to be people doing bad things.
No. This is one of the, this is definitely on point. Like,
But yeah, like
I just think that that what I was in mid flow with there are the that material context sets how I know another way of putting it is that you get fucking 7 billion people and they're all totally different and they all want totally different things and they all do things totally different and some are inclined to love an enormous amount of people more than another person who might end up loving nobody, and there's every grade of that in between, and all different eggs, and that makes a planet. It's the difference. So there's no communism is certainly not to stamp out that difference. And I don't mean just personal difference, but difference in terms of like, to put it crudely, the difference between evil and good. That's like with what is a certain types with Christianity whatsoever. That's, it's up to the people to interpret what they want morally themselves and to make that choice themselves. I think what communism would do is cause the conditions and situations, or cause a different context where all of that variance between people would be in an entirely different experience socially and personally than how it exists today. And I mean, like, personally, like if I'm feeling super shit, or if I've got a head bang, or if I've been abused, the social reproduction, because capitalism is solely focused on production and doesn't pay for reproduction, because it's not profitable. Without that emphasis socially, that malaise, whatever is affecting me negatively, is exacerbated, and the propensity and the possibility or the probability of me going and carrying out sort of heinous shit is multiplied.
and you can't afford the treatment.
Even if I can, I'm still in the context where now I need to go and get more of what afforded me the. It even affects the treatment, the type of treatment, how we frame treatment. So and that's what I wanted to get to as well, actually. You just remind me that here, but like, treatment now would be like medicalized, it would be individualized, whereas I think in that sort of high spirits, I'm working for myself, but I can only do it by working with others, solidarity, that the sort of a system without money and profit and class necessarily relies on a collectivization of material resources, and the relationships change in a way because of that the context of that variance, the negative pool, again, to put it crudely, the context for them to act within to other people is a radically different place. Even if they can't, in this current situation, if they're the type of person that can't afford something, or even if there's someone that just is rabid for accumulating wealth, in a situation where care has the chance to become a paramount product of society. I just think the capacity for innovating in methods of care, in more appropriate application of technology and medicalization,
it'd become culturally ingrained, I suppose, as well, like with ways you might see in Eastern countries, different.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
You can pin East and West.
Yeah. Certainly, I would think over time.
It's just a way that made it easier for me to visualize what you're talking about. If 2 years ago we were having this conversation, like I remember having this conversation 2 years ago in Manchester, and I was kind of going against what you were saying, just like, yeah, but, loads of yeah, but blah blah blah. I couldn't really see. I had no image of what you were talking about, no image of this reality. Whereas I'm not saying now I have an image of that reality, but let's say it's 50% filled in. Like I have some understanding of how this would work now. You know what I mean?
Yeah. In terms of the reality of it, I think all we've got to go on, because I think you framed the question very initially about like there's never been a situation in the past or whatever, but there hasn't, because that hasn't been corrupted. There hasn't, because while like primitive communism has existed, it does end up getting corrupted or whatever. The material
everything
relationships
corrupted.
changed. Well, it just shifts. But actually, that's another good point to get onto in a minute, about dealing with that corruption of an ideal or whatever. But where was I going with that? What had you said?
There was my imagining of the
reality of it. Yeah, sorry, fucking hell. So in terms of the reality of it, we don't have something to allude to as such, but not in a positive sense, but a negative sense. So it's like, if we're able to identify the mechanisms of capitalism and what capitalism literally does to us, I think it's like, you take any given situation, like us sitting here right now, and you go, right, well, surely we prefer to be closer. We probably prefer, or if we're not, we probably prefer to have way better setup. Although obviously yours looks pretty sweet. There's like a load of million
I'd
different.
still prefer to have a better one.
Exactly. There's a million different things that would enhance our current situation that we could blame on capitalism, and it's sort of identifying the constant social impact of capitalism and critiquing it in that situation, and then flipping it, going, well, if that barrier, because this is literally, it's a barrier that I'm not able to just fly to Ireland whenever I want or live there. It's a barrier that whatever primitive technologies that we have at our disposal right now, that we don't know what we want, all these barriers. So it becomes a situation. So in terms of the reality, what does that reality look like? It's about imagining or identifying those barriers and imagining what we could do without them, and doing that with each other. I mean, either like, writing today, I wasn't able to do this because of capitalism, and if it wasn't there, I would have been able to do X, Y, Z. And everyone reading that and going, fuck, wow, yeah, that's crazy. Or just chats over pints talking about this shit. And I think that's where that in reality, that's where that gets found. True struggle. I mean, obviously, I imply by that process that eventually everyone gets so pissed off with capitalism that they go, oh, we should really just get rid of it because it's not doing us any favors.
Well, I'd say people are globally increasingly becoming fed up with the fact that they're working 40 plus hours a week, and saying, what is this for? You know what I mean? What am I doing? And I'd say the last year and a bit with the pandemic and everything has put that in the foreground.
Yeah, definitely. And the other things that the sort of uprisings and the both on the far right and the far left and all that. Yeah, there's an awareness and discourse.
Politics getting scary and things like that.
And I think I've said it elsewhere, but I just wonder what sort of situation the left would be in now to sort of where we'd be in terms of like organizing and building a power base if instead of Chomsky and fucking and what's her name, Naomi Klein 20 years ago, instead of we were reading them, if we were reading Marx and Lenin, and like had a far better analysis of back then with the the Iraqi war and all. I remember all we were doing was, or a lot of people was just arguing over whether or not it was imperialism, American imperialism. Oh, that doesn't exist. oh no, it does. Oh, you're a conspiracy theorist and all this shit. So fucking, of course, it was imperialism. Like, and instead of like spending God knows how long that entire opportunity for building power, we spent it arguing. But if we had read, if Marx and Lenin weren't so, if Marxism wasn't so out of fashion back at the turn of the millennium, we'd probably be in a far more advanced situation than we are now. And things would be in terms of envisioning that reality and working towards it, and being able to answer ourselves, well, what are the practicalities of it. Our utopia would be starting to be built organically from the ground up, And capitalism was a million different experiments with money over hundreds of years, and lots of writing and lots of ideas and lots of things.
Yeah.
Boiling, simmering.
Evolved.
Yeah, and it was just one thing that took off, one seductive thing. And then finally, sorry, I know I'm going on a bit here, but what way did you put it? But basically, the point I made about corruption. I feel, and this sort of comes back to maybe like not a deeper, but a sort of a meta chat about spiritualism, maybe. But I feel that society is addicted, or capitalism is an addiction. And I don't think post-capitalism is going to be this sort of just a seductive phase the way capitalism was, a compulsion. I think it's going to be a continual conscious effort, like as if an addict is at AA.
The cravings don't stop.
Yeah. That seduction there to sort of to exploit someone, to use those old methods, if they ever became old methods, would be there. And it would be, I mean, this is this sort of argument for like, China and Russia were never communist countries, but they were run by communist parties who always wanted to push back this addiction, but it could never be pushed back unless the whole world society was free of it. But it wouldn't be free of it in the sense of like an alcoholic is never free of being an alcoholic. It's a continual practice.
Yeah. It's always a conscious effort.
So, and the capacity for corruption then is something that we've got to be consciously against. Like,
yeah.
Sorry, that was a lot.
No, it's fine. Put that in the context of spiritual corruption then. Like,
the reason I said that was because like spiritualism plays such a role in Alcoholics Anonymous and all that. Maybe that was a moot point. Sorry. But go on.
No. But like, it's. I guess I'm referring to what I suspect is an inevitability of corruption.
Mm-hmm.
Every avenue. So you're saying it would have to be a sort of a constant active like repression of that, or pushback against that.
Yeah.
Constantly looking out for it.
But like, if you've got like, if you just imagine sort of being addicted to alcohol, and you wake up and you go, I want to drink, and you've got to just make that conscious decision to go no, and then start moving forward with your day. Yeah. So in terms of like in terms of socializing that scenario, you've got like a community that wakes up and knows what it needs to work on to be able to live for the year in that day, like, and they go off and they do that, and someone goes, if I just sort of reorganize things here, I could maybe do less of what everyone else is doing, but get the same amount as them, and maybe start like getting more than them by arguing that, like, well, I'm organizing all this stuff, and I know, you say I'm not on the line, but I've look what I've organized. I've increased our trade by blah blah blah, and eventually
So
they've
people
got
just didn't be ready to give them a kick up the arse, basically.
yes,
Just go, calm down there. We don't
yeah,
need to double it this year or next year. Look, we just need to have
exactly. Yeah, that's what I mean.
yeah,
Yeah. So I mean, if you think of it, the whole, like, in terms of a rearticulated post-theistic spiritual framework,
yeah,
I think you put it before, a rearticulated sense of spiritualism, and an appreciation for even that latent spiritualism in Marx, like the lifting of literal spirits and esteem, and how you feel about yourself through getting up and working for yourself, which can only be done through working for everyone else as well. Like,
yeah, yeah. Well, that would be like living an essential life, basically. That what I would see as living. You're living essentially. You know, you're spending your time to meet your essential needs.
oh,
And
okay,
you know what I mean? So yeah, it sounds great. I'm on for that. You know?
absolutely,
But
essential living. I mean, yeah, that's, if you
but
think about it now. Oh, go on. Sorry.
yeah, so I guess where spirituality comes into this again is like I would still suspect that even if we were living that way, you'd still have spiritual yearning. You know what I mean? Even if these sort
Okay.
of what we're sharing spiritually, as in like human spirit, is present and evident, and it's satisfying in so many ways. I still think um, people still need to satiate the whole of what's outside of human spirit.
Okay.
So
Okay.
like I asked you what your concept of spirituality was before, and it was very nice, but it only went as far as human spirit, I thought,
It
and I've
sounds
come
like I just
across
did that again by accident.
possibly, but I've come across a lot of people who seem to have a spiritual sensibility, and like an articulate and intelligent spiritual sensibility, but it only goes as far as human spirit. It only goes as far as your consciousness. You know what I mean? And I guess I've been trying to figure out a way to express the importance of stepping beyond that. You know what I mean? Um, like I'm sure people who are like undergoing um clinical trials with psilocybin and things like that, and they're having mystical experiences, it's very easy for them to understand what the importance of that. You know what I mean? Or
Yeah.
someone who goes off and does ayahuasca for a weekend, or someone who joins some sort of religious group that sing together, and they reach these sort of spiritual highs where they're completely outside of themselves, like what's the word, uh like transcendence.
Yeah. Yeah.
um so yeah, I've been trying to figure out how to express that without stepping in any of the footsteps of religion or new age.
Yeah. Yeah.
New
Oh,
age
yeah.
anything,
Like,
because it's all ruined. Like,
well, I mean, it seems how you describe it there to stand on its own for sure. It's like my, so I'll relay it, my understanding of what you said. So my assumption has been running the entire time that, like, if we're sort of, if we're satisfied in our life, that that there's not going to be much need. We're not going to feel lack, and to think about beyond that. But yeah, you've raised the very real possibility of, well, you can have everything satisfied, and that question, that yearning, can still be a possibility. I mean, like, my instant impulse is that, well, I still argue that all we can possibly know about those sort of yearnings is conditioned by capitalism. That if you're materially lacking, you're socially lacking, and there's that serious lack. But then if you're sort of more well off, there's like the ennui of like modern capitalism, and there's nothing really to live for, and there's a lack of meaning, and that a lot of people would sort of pursue spiritualism to fill that situation. And so outside of capitalism, I wonder, and I think I think there's that sort of, that like puritanical imaginary of, like, um, yeah, people get into sort of the Americas and starting to build those communities unrestricted from sort of the old world, the institutions of the old world, and just like it's fucking based on nothing but and they would have been bringing God with them, but that they would have been that the satisfaction that they derived would have been from the building and the working and the togetherness or whatever. And I think that's definitely very much the sort of the limits of my sort of horizon in terms of analyzing spiritualism. And I guess I just know how I just haven't sort of tried to conceive of it past that maybe. Well, yeah, no, that's a sort of a very real possibility, and would be a big sort of question to have to answer in that situation for sure. But it stands alone as well. I like I don't know why you feel that just even articulating that possibility is enough of a sort of a singular entity of a thing that stands away from previous instances. No,
Articulating what thing?
the just even saying like, well, listen, we can have, even if we lived in even if the whole world was communist and we were living that, how you described it, that sort of the human spirit and all of that, how I've imagined spiritualism was stated, there's still sort of a bigger yearning. Just that, but I don't know why you're worried that would step, as you said, like into other religions or an older frame.
Oh, well, I'm trying to be careful not to step in those footsteps.
Yeah.
So like if everyone's material conditions are met and we are living a harmonious human experience and it's fulfilling, like super fulfilling, and we're living that essential life, we're still faced with death. We still know we're going to die. Our loved ones are dying around us. You know what I mean? And I think like in Ireland anyway, I've definitely recognized that, like, regardless of how much somebody subscribes or rejects Catholicism, everyone tends to appreciate it when somebody dies, because there is some sort of infrastructure there. There's someone to take care of this. There's someone to run us through some kind of motions. And if it wasn't there, I'd be really interested to see how the culture would form. You know what I mean? What would people do? Like, and you know, there would be people who just wouldn't be able to afford to do anything. And I think it's sad that we have to leave it in the hands of Catholicism. You know what I mean? In Ireland, like, I think
For sure.
It's an awful shame that, like, it's great at the same time, like, and I appreciate it at the time. Like, oh, this is good. There's a ritual framework provided here to send this person off and to deal with the confusion and disillusionment everyone feels in this situation. But that sucks. Like
No, I'm sorry.
Organization is like worse than the entire Nazi movement. Like, it's like the genocide, the rape and child abuse, like everything. Just dead babies buried around the fucking country and everything. You know what I mean? It's just wild. Like, how, if that was any other organization or corporation or anything, they'd be done.
Well,
just like the Nazi organization, gone. No one's doing business with the Nazis. Like,
they wanted to.
Not anymore.
Only because they got caught out.
The Catholics got caught out too, man.
That's a good point. Oh no, I meant the people wanting to do, but everyone wanting to do business with the Nazis were like, oh, this is probably a bad move. I mean, that's two very distinct things for sure. Like, appreciating that sort of institutional infrastructure, and then just the shame that it has to be run by them, and that leaves it open for something secular.
Well, I'd like to see a future where there was something that, you know, I feel like there's a mistake in our evolution. You know what I mean? Like, and it's an essential mistake. And it's just because of corruption. It's just because of power, I suppose. You know what I mean? People weren't allowed read the Bible until a few hundred years ago,
Yeah.
go by death and all those sort of things. You know what I mean? It got completely corrupted, and I guess it's because the nature of spirituality is so undefinable or indefinable. You know what I mean? You can't put walls on it. You can't even really describe it. Like, it's so vulnerable to notions. Like, it's so subjective. And like, one of the things I've been thinking very strongly is that, like, when people speak about spirituality, that like and I've been trying to do it myself, that if someone's speaking about it objectively, they should either stop themselves or someone should stop them. You know what I mean? Like,
Yes.
you're actually speaking about that objectively now. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And like, over time, it's become more apparent to me that I have no time for that. You know what I mean? And I know I do it as well. Everyone does it. Like,
We keep saying should.
you keep saying should, or I think it would be good if.
Yeah.
But yeah, that I think that should be at the foreground. You know what I mean? That we're talking about something that is unconceptual, yet when we talk about it, we're conceptualizing it.
Mm-hmm.
That contradiction needs to be understood, and we can't speak about it objectively. Like, we just can't. Like,
Yeah.
it has to be. If you're speaking about your experience, you need to be outlining that this is your subjective experience of it. You know what I mean? Like, I'm sure you've heard plenty of us go on in the past about something in one of our experiences that was so profound, and this means that, and that.
Oh, I absolutely know what you're talking about. Yeah. And it's I never realized to sort of articulate it that way, objective, subjective, but that's perfect framing for it.
I think every turn that spirituality has gone wrong, can be sort of brought back to that. You know what I mean? Like, it could have been remedied if that was in the foreground from the get-go, if it was recognized that this element of human experience is indefinable, unconceptual. You know what I mean? And when we conceptualize it, we're only making an effort. Like,
it's like a contingent theory.
Yeah.
An attempt to communicate something.
Yeah.
Not to establish something.
Yeah, not to establish something. And I suppose that the reason I'm saying that again is because that's how it was so easy for this to be used to gain power. It's so easily corruptible. You know, people can pull the wool over each other's eyes so easily.
Absolutely.
It's what seems to be a very important element of the human experience,
but
it's so easily corruptible.
The manipulation there, and obviously I'm thinking of the Roman Empire, and the manipulation is from the one side. The manipulator is obviously in terms of power and empire, but the thing that they're manipulating, I would have initially, or personally still, my impulse is that the thing that they're manipulating is the material lack and the social lack. But what you're suggesting, I guess, is that the point of manipulation where the effect of establishing something objectively is so impacting, is this other deeper or wider, larger yearning rather than that social material lack.
Well, you could just call it mystery. You could call it mystery, and you could say, you could imagine that we all we set up a perfect life for ourselves and a perfect environment for us all to flourish happily. But mystery still hasn't gone away. You know what I mean? Mystery is still going to be there, and it's probably going to grow in volume. I'd imagine if the world communally and collectively ignored mystery, it would grow in volume. It would probably like, it would be like we're brushing every death under the carpet. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but I mean, also sort of teasing it does lead to greater mysteries. I mean, like science, like Chomsky makes the argument that that the Kantian physical world, the Newtonian physical world, doesn't exist anymore. I think the juncture he points at is Einstein, or maybe he's a point along the way, but in terms of sort of quantum physics and everything, the physical world that we know does, and still communicate to one another, doesn't exist anymore. And our scientific pursuit of knowledge has led to, I mean, I don't even know how a fucking CD works.
As in, like, we got to realize that in the center of every atom or cell is dark matter.
Yeah,
it's just there's a load of numbers and fizzy fluff in there.
The horizon of mystery just gets pushed further and further and larger and larger. Like, I mean, for me, it's hard to definitively say that science can't reach a horizon. And maybe that's desperately naive, but it's mirrored by the idea that we can't say socially that manipulation isn't based on the material lack and the social lack, rather than the sort of the lack caused by the mystery. But fuck yeah, I guess framing it in terms of mystery, when you think of, like, because there's an assumption, isn't there, that, like, say a peasant isn't going to have big questions, but of course they're faced by death and mystery. There's no escaping that.
Yeah.
So that must be there constantly.
Thinking of midlife crises, I suppose, is another way to look at it.
Yeah, well, that's definitely a product of capitalism.
I don't know. I'd say the desperate remedies, or the desperate grasping for rent. Well, would you not say that it's sort of in realizing that you're over halfway through now? You know what I mean?
Sorry. Yeah, of course. Yeah. Mortality absolutely plays a part.
So I think, regardless of, hold on a sec.
The sun is baiting down there.
It's lovely. It's lovely now.
Oh, okay.
It is lovely now.
It looked like that still when you said it was raining. Go on, sorry.
I think I was just giving another example of how you're not escaping that mystery, and then why are we talking about that? Because mystery is so easily exploited, and the reason we're talking about that is because I'm trying to explain why I'm concerned, why I think it's important, why I have been trying to figure out a way to express why I think it's important without sounding like a goof. No, you should be spiritual like me.
Should. We're coming up to about an hour and a half. So I think that to tie that point off with what you had said before, but make it explicitly part of something that you termed like a post-theistic spiritual framework, taking basically everything that you just said, particularly summing up with the mystery, the not impact or emphasis, but the significance of mystery, along with the idea of, like, what you had said earlier, treating X, whatever you're about to tell me, basically, in terms of like having a sandwich or reading a book, treating this relationship with mystery in the same way as our relationship with food and with intellectual nourishment.
Yeah.
Hit me.
Yeah.
Hit me up.
Well, will we leave it as a cliffhanger?
A clip. Oh.
And do a second part.
Yeah, that's not a bad idea. Actually, when you pulled the whole mystery thing on me, I was like, oh fuck, this is another dimension. This isn't it. But that's a great idea. Yeah, sure. Fuck it. I'll talk to you offline about what we can do then. Okay, great. Any final points, or was that the zinger, cliffhanger? Yeah, no. I think like it could even be a 3-part. I think you originally suggested that we do it as a little bit of a series. Yeah, absolutely. Come at it fresh again like this. Brill. Okay, well I'll stop recording then. Yeah, cool. Thanks, man. Great. And I can't wait to part 2. Yeah.